The Guru on Top of the Mountain by David Russo. Chapter 1. The Rumor. The rumor did not arrive loudly. It slipped into the seeker's life the way dusk enters a valley, without announcement, without urgency, yet impossible to ignore once it had settled. They first heard it in a roadside tea house, spoken casually by a man who did not seem to care whether he was believed. Between sips of bitter tea, he mentioned a solitary figure living high above the villages, on a mountain whose name few remembered and fewer dared to climb. A guru, the man said, though not the kind who gathered crowds or accepted offerings. This one lived alone. This one answered no summons. They say he knows, the man added, shrugging, as if knowledge were a trivial thing. Knows what? Someone asked. The man smiled faintly. What people keep asking. The words lodged themselves in the seeker's mind like a seed caught in stone. The seeker had not been searching for a guru. At least, not consciously. Life was full enough already. Work to be done, obligations met, questions postponed. Like most people, the seeker had learned how to survive without answers. Yet survival, they had begun to suspect, was not the same as living. That night, the rumor echoed louder than the clatter of thoughts that usually filled the seeker's mind. Who was this guru? Why would someone choose solitude over recognition? And what kind of answers could possibly be found on a mountain that were not already buried in books, lectures, or clever conversations? Skepticism arose quickly, as it always did. If wisdom were so easily found, the seeker thought, wouldn't everyone already have it? The world was crowded with teachers selling certainty, enlightenment packaged into neat phrases. The seeker had tasted those words before, sweet at first, then strangely hollow. And yet, this rumor was different. It did not promise transformation. It did not advertise miracles. It did not even invite the seeker to come. It simply existed. Over the following days, the seeker noticed a subtle restlessness growing beneath the surface of ordinary life. Tasks were completed, conversations held, meals eaten, but something essential felt unfinished. Questions that had long been ignored began to stir. Is this all? Is there a way to live without constant striving? Why does knowing so much still feel like knowing nothing at all? The seeker tried to dismiss the thoughts. After all, mountains were dangerous, gurus unreliable, and life too practical for romantic quests. But the mind, once opened to a possibility, rarely closes again. The image of the mountain rose unbidden during quiet moments, its slopes hidden in cloud, its summit untouched by noise. Wisdom, the seeker realized, was not the accumulation of answers. It was the courage to stand honestly within a question. Late one evening, the seeker returned to the tea house, hoping, perhaps foolishly, to hear more. The man who had spoken of the guru was gone. No one else seemed to know what the seeker was talking about. Some laughed. Others warned against chasing illusions. Mountains are empty, one elder said. You only hear your own voice up there. The words unsettled the seeker more than comforted them. What if that is exactly the point? That night, sleep came fitfully. Dreams rose and fell like mist. Paths winding upward, voices fading into wind, a silence so vast it felt alive. When morning arrived, the seeker woke with a strange clarity, not excitement, not certainty, but resolve. The decision was not dramatic. There was no declaration, no sense of destiny fulfilled. It was simply the recognition that staying would require more effort than leaving. To ignore the pull now would mean carrying it forever. The seeker packed lightly. Few possessions felt necessary when facing a mountain. As they prepared to leave, a quiet fear surfaced, not of failure, but of change. For if the rumor was false, the seeker would return disappointed. But if it was true, there would be no returning to life as it had been. Before departing, the seeker paused, struck by an unexpected realization. The journey had already begun. Not with the first step toward the mountain, but with the willingness to listen, to a whisper, to doubt, to the unease that signals growth. Wisdom, the seeker sensed, does not announce itself with certainty. It arrives as a disturbance, a gentle refusal to let things remain as they are. As the road curved toward the distant peaks, the mountain remained unseen. Yet its presence was undeniable, like a question waiting patiently for a life brave enough to answer it. Chapter 2. The Ascent begins. The mountain did not greet the seeker with ceremony. There was no sign marking the start of the path, no reassuring marker to confirm that this was the right way. The road simply narrowed, then faded into earth and stone, as if daring the seeker to decide whether intention alone was enough to continue. With each step upward, the air thinned and the noise of the world fell away. Villages shrank into memory, replaced by wind brushing against rock and the steady rhythm of breath. At first, the seeker's body led the way, muscles working, feet adjusting, hands steadying against rough surfaces. The mind, accustomed to control, followed reluctantly. The climb was harder than expected, not because the path was steep, though it was, but because the seeker carried more than supplies. Old ambitions, half-forgiven failures, and the quiet need to be seen all pressed inward as the mountain rose higher. Each pause for breath brought with it an unwelcome companion. Thought, why am I doing this? What if there is no one at the top? What if I am chasing another illusion? The seeker tried to silence these questions with determination, but the mountain seemed to amplify them instead. There was no distraction here, no crowd to blend into, no task urgent enough to drown out the inner voice. The mountain offered only honesty. As the hours passed, fatigue set in. Legs trembled. The pack grew heavier, though nothing new had been added. The seeker realized with some irritation that effort alone was not enough. Willpower could move the body, but it could not quiet resistance. Pride insisted on pushing forward without rest. Fear whispered that turning back would be safer. Regret lingered like a shadow, reminding the seeker of paths once taken and abandoned. At a narrow ledge, the seeker stopped. Below, the valley stretched wide and familiar, filled with routes that required no courage at all. The thought of descending was strangely comforting. Down there, no one expected transformation. Down there, confusion could be disguised as busyness. The mountain, unmoved, waited. In that pause, something subtle shifted. The seeker noticed that the struggle was not against the climb itself, but against the discomfort of being exposed. Here, effort revealed weakness instead of masking it. Each misstep was undeniable. Each breath announced limitation. A quiet insight emerged. Resistance does not disappear through force, it softens through awareness. The seeker sat on the rock and allowed the body to rest without judgment. The wind cooled sweat from the skin. Thoughts rose and fell like clouds, no longer chased away. For the first time since beginning the journey, the seeker did not ask whether the climb was worth it. The question itself seemed misplaced. When the seeker rose again, the steps were slower, more deliberate. Pride no longer demanded speed. The mountain did not reward this change with ease, but the effort felt cleaner, less burdened. Pain remained, yet it no longer felt like punishment. As the path twisted upward, memories surfaced uninvited. Moments of arrogance, times when fear had been disguised as reason, opportunities avoided in the name of safety. The seeker felt the familiar urge to justify, to rewrite the past. But the mountain allowed no revisions. It reflected only what was carried. Understanding dawned gradually. The mountain was not an obstacle to be conquered, but a mirror that could not lie. The higher the seeker climbed, the clearer it became that growth was not about accumulating strength, but about releasing what was unnecessary. With each stretch of trail, the seeker adjusted the pack, discarding small items once thought essential. The relief was immediate, almost embarrassing in its simplicity. By dusk, the seeker reached a narrow shelf where the path briefly leveled. The sky burned with fading light, and the world below seemed impossibly distant. Exhaustion settled deep into the bones, but beneath it was a quieter feeling, humility. The seeker realized then that the ascent had already delivered its first teaching. The path inward is inseparable from the path upward. Every step taken against gravity revealed what the seeker had been leaning on all along. As night gathered around the mountain, the seeker lay beneath the open sky, no longer measuring progress by distance traveled. The climb would continue tomorrow. So would the resistance, the fear, the unraveling. Yet something essential had begun. The seeker was no longer climbing to reach the summit. They were climbing to learn how to walk without turning away from themselves. Chapter 3. The Silence Above. The final stretch of the ascent was gentler than the rest, though the seeker scarcely noticed. Fatigue had dulled the sense of effort, and expectation had sharpened the mind. Somewhere beyond the thinning air and pale stone lay the summit. And, if the rumors were true, the guru. The seeker rehearsed questions with each step, polishing them as one might polish offerings before a sacred meeting. When the path finally ended, there was no gate, no shrine, no sign of arrival. The summit opened quietly, like an exhale. Wind moved freely across open ground. A few low structures clung to the rock as if placed there by patience rather than design. Near them, a small garden grew, unexpected and stubborn, green leaves pushing through dark soil carried from below. The guru was there, not seated in meditation, not surrounded by symbols or students, simply kneeling in the dirt, hands moving steadily, removing weeds with care. The seeker stopped several paces away, unsure whether to speak or wait. The heart raced, eager for recognition, for confirmation that the journey had not been in vain. The guru did not look up. Minutes passed. The seeker shifted weight from one foot to the other. The wind spoke. The garden continued to grow. Finally, the seeker cleared his throat. "I have come a long way," he said, unable to keep urgency from his voice. The words felt thin as soon as they left the mouth. The guru nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the weather. Silence returned. At first, the seeker interpreted the quiet as a test, perhaps a deliberate withholding meant to provoke humility. The seeker straightened, determined not to fail so quickly. But as time stretched, irritation rose. Was this the wisdom everyone spoke of? A man tending soil while a traveler waited in uncertainty? Expectation tightened into frustration. The seeker had imagined revelation arriving like a sudden light, a phrase that would rearrange life into clarity. Instead, there was only the sound of wind passing through leaves and the faint scrape of roots loosened from earth. The seeker felt unseen. Anger flickered, quickly followed by doubt. What if this is all there is? What if the journey led only to disappointment? The temptation to speak again, to demand attention, meaning, instruction, pressed hard against the chest. Yet something held the seeker still. As the guru worked, there was no haste, no resistance. Each movement belonged fully to itself. The seeker noticed the steadiness of breath, the ease with which effort flowed into rest and back again. Nothing about the guru's presence suggested secrecy or performance. It was simply complete. A quiet discomfort surfaced, not with the guru, but within the seeker. In the absence of words, the seeker became acutely aware of the noise inside, judgments forming, impatience flaring, the constant need to define what was happening. Silence, it seemed, did not remove confusion. It exposed it. The seeker realized then that silence was not empty. It was unforgivingly full. After some time, how long, the seeker could not tell, the guru stood and brushed soil from his hands. He glanced at the seeker, eyes calm, unreadable. For a brief moment, the seeker felt completely transparent, as though every unspoken motive had been laid bare. The guru gestured toward the garden, then toward a nearby bench of stone. He sat. The seeker followed, uncertain, strangely quiet now. No teachings were offered, no questions invited. The guru poured water into a small cup and handed it to the seeker. The water was cool, ordinary, undeniably real. The seeker drank, aware of thirst only after it had been eased. Understanding did not arrive as an answer. It arrived as a recognition. The mind demands meaning, but wisdom begins before demand. The seeker saw how often silence had been avoided in life, filled with noise, explanation, distraction. Silence had been mistaken for absence, when it was presence without ornament. Here, on the summit, there was nothing to grasp, and therefore nothing to defend. The guru returned to the garden. The seeker remained seated, watching clouds drift without naming them. Thoughts arose, but they no longer insisted on attention. For the first time in a long while, the seeker did not feel the need to arrive anywhere else. As evening settled over the mountain, the seeker understood the day's lesson, though it was not spoken. What is most essential does not announce itself. It waits, patiently, silently, until the seeker learns how to listen without reaching. And in that listening, something deeper than understanding begins to take root. Chapter 4: Questions and Stones. By the fourth morning on the mountain, the seeker's patience had worn thin. Silence, once intriguing, now felt like a locked door. The guru continued his days as before, tending the garden, fetching water, repairing stone walls loosened by wind and time. Not once did he offer instruction, nor did he ask the seeker to stay or leave. The seeker, however, was full of questions. They rose like a tide held back too long. What is truth? The seeker finally asked as he walked beside the guru along a narrow path. Why do we suffer? How do I know what my life is meant for? The questions spilled out urgent and unfiltered, each one sharpened by years of uncertainty. The seeker waited, breath held, as if the right words might finally unlock everything. The guru stopped near a low stone wall. Without answering, they bent down and lifted a loose rock, placing it carefully back into the wall. Then another, and another. Please, the seeker said, frustration breaking through restraint. I didn't come all this way to watch you stack stones. The guru straightened and met the seeker's gaze for the first time that day. His eyes were neither stern nor kind. They were clear. Then help, the guru said simply. Reluctantly, the seeker knelt and began lifting stones. The work was heavier than expected. Each rock demanded attention. Too much force and it slipped, too little and it wobbled uselessly. The seeker's mind continued to churn, questions repeating themselves even as the hands worked. Truth, the seeker pressed, lifting another stone, shouldn't be this difficult. The guru placed a stone beside his. Truth is not difficult, they said. Carrying too many questions at once is. The words unsettled the seeker. Are questions wrong? No, the guru replied. But they are heavy. When you carry them without setting them down, you mistake the weight for depth. He continued working in silence. Sweat beaded on the seeker's brow. Arms ached. Slowly, attention shifted from the questions to the stones themselves. Their texture, his balance, the quiet satisfaction when one fit cleanly into place. After some time, the guru spoke again. Ask your question once more. The seeker paused. The urgency had faded, replaced by uncertainty. What is my purpose? They asked more softly now. The guru handed the seeker a stone, smooth and unremarkable. Place it, he said. The seeker examined the wall, found a gap, and slid the stone in. It fit perfectly. The guru nodded. For now, he said, that. The seeker frowned. That can't be all. It is all that can be answered honestly, the guru replied. Purpose is not revealed ahead of action. It reveals itself through action that is fully met. Later that day, the seeker was given another task, carrying water from a spring lower on the mountain. The path was steep, the buckets heavy. With each trip, irritation resurfaced. This was not what the seeker had imagined wisdom would look like. By the third trip, anger flared. You avoid my questions, the seeker accused. You give me chores instead of truth. The guru listened without interruption. When the seeker finished, breathless and flushed, the guru picked up a stone and held it out. Tell me, the guru said, what is this? A stone, the seeker replied. The guru dropped it into the bucket of water. It sank immediately. That is what your questions do, the guru said. They sink you into depth before you have learned how to breathe there. The seeker stared at the water, watching ripples fade. Something in the chest softened, not into agreement, but into curiosity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, the seeker sat quietly with the stones stacked neatly nearby. Questions still existed, but they no longer demanded immediate answers. They felt less like weapons and more like invitations. The seeker began to understand. Meaning cannot be seized through interrogation. It emerges when the hands are occupied, the mind humbled, and the heart willing to wait. Wisdom, the seeker realized, is not withheld out of cruelty. It waits until the questioner is ready to hear the answer without needing it to be about themselves. Chapter 5. The Lesson of Fire. The morning the guru spoke of fire, the air was damp and cold. Clouds clung to the mountain as if unwilling to let go. The seeker welcomed the instruction at first. Fire, at least, felt purposeful. It promised warmth, clarity, something unmistakably useful. Build one, the guru said, gesturing toward a clearing where yesterday's rain still darkened the ground. The seeker gathered wood eagerly, only to discover that every branch was wet. The bark peeled easily, revealing slick, uncooperative fibers beneath. Still, confidence lingered. Fire, the seeker believed, was a problem to be solved. They struck flint against steel. Sparks leapt and vanished. Again and again, nothing caught. Hours passed. Fingers numbed. Smoke rose briefly, teasing success, then died. Frustration tightened the seeker's jaw. Each failed attempt felt personal, as though the mountain itself were mocking the effort. This is impossible, The seeker snapped at last. You gave me the wrong conditions. The guru watched quietly. I gave you the conditions you have, he said. The seeker tried harder. Faster. With more force. Tinder was scraped thinner, sparks struck more aggressively. The result was the same. Failure. Anger flared hot and sudden. The seeker slammed the flint onto the ground. What is the lesson here? They demanded. Patience. Humility? I've had enough of riddles. The guru approached the unlit fire. Kneeling, they rearranged the wood, lifting it slightly off the damp earth, creating small spaces where air could move. They did not strike a spark. Fire, the guru said, is not persuaded by effort alone. They stood and stepped back. Try again. The seeker hesitated, pride wounded. Slowly, they rebuilt the fire as the guru had shown. Not stronger, not faster, but differently. The strike of flint was gentle this time. A spark landed, lingered, breathed. Flame appeared. The seeker froze, afraid to disturb it. As the fire grew, warmth spread through cold hands and deeper places still. The guru spoke softly. You were trying to force the fire to obey your will. Fire requires conditions, not commands. The seeker watched the flames dance, mesmerized. I wanted it too badly, he said. You wanted the result without respecting the process, the guru replied. Effort driven by impatience burns itself out. Effort guided by attention endures. Silence followed, filled with the sound of crackling wood. The seeker felt something loosen inside, a long-held belief that struggle was proof of worth. Later, as they sat by the fire, the guru added, anger is also a kind of fire. It can warm you to truth or consume your vision. The difference is not the flame, but how you tend it. That night, the seeker reflected on all the moments life had felt uncooperative, relationships, ambitions, answers that refused to ignite. How often had they struck harder instead of stepping back? How often had they blamed conditions instead of learning from them? The fire burned steadily now, fed by care rather than force. The seeker realized the mountain had offered another mirror. Frustration reveals not the difficulty of the task, but the rigidity of expectation. As embers glowed and stars emerged, a quieter confidence took root, not in mastery, but in trust. Trust that understanding unfolds when effort listens instead of insists. The guru rose to leave. Remember, he said, fire does not resist you. Life does not resist you. You respond precisely to how you meet them. The seeker watched the flames until he softened into coals, carrying the warmth inward. For the first time, the seeker understood. Wisdom is not found in conquering circumstances, but in learning how to create the conditions where truth can breathe. Chapter 6. The Ghosts That Follow. The mountain's nights held a stillness that unsettled the seeker. Daylight had provided tasks, movement, and the reassurance of visible effort. Darkness stripped all of that away. When night fell, there was nowhere to go, nothing to do, only the raw presence of oneself. The first night, the seeker embraced the quiet. By the second, it grew heavy. On the third, the silence pressed inward, rousing what daylight had kept hidden. Memories arrived unbidden. Faces long avoided appeared with startling sharpness. Words once spoken in anger returned, unchanged by time. Missed opportunities, subtle betrayals, moments of cowardice disguised as caution, all drifted into view like shapes in a dense fog. The seeker felt the familiar tightening in the chest, the reflex to distract, to shove them aside, to judge or explain. Sleep refused to come. Rising, the seeker stepped into the night. The sky stretched infinite and indifferent above, stars scattered like distant witnesses. The mountain offered no comfort, only space. The guru sat near the dying fire, already awake. They won't leave me alone, the seeker said, voice low. No matter how high I climb. The guru did not ask who they were. Why would they? Came the gentle reply. You brought them with you. The seeker sank to sit. I thought this journey was about leaving the past behind. The guru stirred the embers. A faint glow returned. Distance does not silence pursuit. It only makes it louder. The seeker closed their eyes. Memories pressed harder. Regret sharpened into self-recrimination. I don't know how to face them without breaking, they confessed. A long silence. Then the guru said, do not face them. Sit with them. That's the same thing, the seeker said. No, the guru replied. Facing is resistance. Sitting is acceptance. They gestured toward the fire. When cold comes, Do you fight it? Or do you draw near to warmth? Hesitantly, the seeker turned inward. The memories did not soften, but the need to argue, to justify, to condemn began to fade. One memory emerged more vividly than the rest, a careless act that caused harm long ago. Breath caught. Shame surged. I cannot forgive myself, the seeker whispered. The guru nodded. Then do not forgive yet. First, understand. Understand what? That the one who acted then and the one who sits here now are not separate, the guru said. Neither can be erased. Tears came, sudden and warm. What am I meant to do with that? Listen, the guru said. Every ghost carries a message. They return not to punish, but to be acknowledged. The seeker stayed with the memory, resisting the impulse to rewrite it. Beneath the shame, something else emerged: fear, confusion, a longing for belonging that had been unseen at the time. Compassion flickered, not as excuse, but as context. The memory loosened. One by one, others followed. Some remained unresolved. Not all were gentle, but none shouted anymore. They waited. You think wisdom is built by adding light, the guru said. Often, it is built by learning to sit in shadow without fleeing. The fire sank lower. Dawn was still hours away. Yet the seeker felt lighter, not cleansed, not redeemed, but truthful. I thought enlightenment meant peace, the seeker murmured. It does, the guru replied. But not the kind that comes from forgetting. The kind that comes from including. Finally lying down, the seeker found rest. The ghosts did not disappear. They lingered at a distance, no longer pursuing, no longer accusing. The seeker understood. The past does not chase to bind us. It follows to be seen, so it can stop guiding from behind. That night, the seeker learned that wisdom is not the absence of darkness, but the courage to sit within it until its shape is revealed. And in that sitting, something unshakable began to form. Chapter 7. The Guru's Absence. The guru was gone when the seeker awoke. At first, the absence felt ordinary. Perhaps the guru had gone to gather water or tend some unseen corner of the mountain. The seeker prepared the morning fire and waited. Hours passed. The sun climbed. The garden remained untouched. A quiet unease crept in. By midday, certainty arrived. The guru had not merely stepped away. They had disappeared. Panic rose swiftly, sharp and disorienting. The seekers searched the summit, calling out, scanning the narrow paths that fell away into mist. There was no sign, no message, no instruction, no farewell. Only the wind, steady and unconcerned. Abandonment, the seeker realized, carries a distinct flavor. It does not scream. It hollows. Now what? The seeker asked the empty air, anger following close behind fear. Was this another lesson? The mountain did not answer. For the first time since arriving, the seeker felt exposed, not to silence, but to responsibility. There was no one left to observe, correct, or reassure. No one to embody wisdom, while the seeker remained safely ignorant. The days that followed were awkward and uncertain. The seeker cooked clumsily, burned food, wasted water. The garden suffered from uneven care. The fire sometimes failed. Each mistake felt amplified without the guru's calm presence to soften it. Yet life continued. Hunger demanded attention. Cold required preparation. The sky signaled whether changes whether or not the seeker noticed. Slowly, necessity replaced anxiety. The seeker stopped waiting and began responding. With no teacher to impress, movements became simpler. Chores lost their performative edge. The seeker worked not to learn a lesson, but because the work needed doing. Something subtle shifted in that sincerity. One evening, as the seeker watched clouds gather over the valley, a realization surfaced. The guru had never been doing the mountain's work. They had been participating in it. Now, so was the seeker. Days passed. The absence grew less sharp. Silence returned, but it felt different now, less like withholding, more like space. Without guidance, the seeker noticed thoughts arising and dissolving on their own. The urge to interpret everything faded. Some moments were peaceful, others restless. All were allowed. One afternoon, while repairing the stone wall alone, the seeker paused mid-task. There was no question forming, no insight demanding recognition. Just stone, hands, breath, sky. The seeker smiled, surprised. It became clear that the guru's disappearance was not a withdrawal of wisdom, but a transfer of trust. Understanding arose quietly. Guidance can only take you to the edge of your own seeing. Beyond that, you must stand without leaning. At night, the seeker sat beneath the stars and felt no need to summon meaning. Presence was enough. Not profound, simply complete. The mountain, once a challenge, had become a companion. By the time the guru returned, unannounced, as quietly as they had left, the seeker noticed something unexpected. There was no rush of relief. They shared a glance. Nothing needed to be said. The guru observed the garden, the fire, the wall. They nodded once. "You did not wait," they said. "I couldn't," the seeker replied. Life kept happening. The guru smiled. That is the lesson. The seeker understood then. Wisdom matures when support is removed. Not as abandonment, but as invitation. The guru's absence had revealed what presence alone could not. That clarity does not come from being guided forever, but from discovering that you are already capable of walking in silence. And in that discovery, the seeker had taken a step no teacher could take for them. Chapter 8. The Fall. The traveler arrived just after dawn, emerging from the lower path with cautious steps and hopeful eyes. The seeker saw them first, a lone figure carrying the familiar weight of expectation. Something stirred in the seeker's chest: recognition, pride, and an unspoken sense of arrival. Here was proof, the seeker thought, that the mountain had changed them. They welcomed the traveler warmly, offering water and a place to rest. Conversation came easily. The traveler spoke of confusion, of questions that refused to quiet, of the rumor that had drawn them upward. The seeker listened, nodding, feeling the shape of the story align neatly with their own past. Without noticing when it began, the seeker slipped into teaching. They spoke of silence, of patience, of ghosts and fire. They repeated phrases once heard from the guru, now polished by memory. The traveler leaned in, grateful, eyes bright with trust. Each nod fed the seeker's growing certainty. Understanding, the seeker believed, had ripened into wisdom. Later, as they worked near the edge of a steep incline, the seeker suggested a shortcut, an efficient way, they said, to see the valley below. The traveler hesitated. The seeker smiled reassuringly. "You'll be fine," they said. "Fear is part of the lesson." The ground shifted suddenly. Loose stones gave way. The traveler slipped, catching himself hard against the slope below. He was not gravely injured, but shaken, scraped, frightened. The seeker froze. In the silence that followed, something inside collapsed. The words spoken earlier echoed back, hollow and exposed. Teaching had turned into assumption, confidence into carelessness. The traveler looked up, pain and confusion mixing in their eyes. "You said it was safe," they whispered. The seeker had no answer. They helped the traveler back slowly, every movement heavy with realization. The mountain, indifferent as ever, held the truth without commentary. That night, the seeker could not sleep. The fall replayed again and again, not the body slipping, but the moment before, when certainty replaced attention. The seeker saw how easily insight had been used as identity, how quickly learning had been worn like armor. The guru said nothing when the seeker confessed. They listened, hands resting quietly in their lap. "I thought I understood," the seeker said at last. "I wanted to help." The guru nodded. "And in wanting to help, you stopped seeing." The seeker bowed their head. Shame burned. "Then what is the difference?" they asked. "Between understanding and wisdom." The guru looked toward the darkened path where the traveler had descended. "Understanding speaks," they said. "Wisdom watches." They continued. "Understanding wants to be useful. Wisdom wants to be accurate. One moves quickly, the other waits." The seeker felt the truth of it settle painfully deep. The next morning, the seeker found the place where the traveler had slipped. The stones were still loose. The danger had not been in the path alone, but in the assumption that it belonged to the seeker to guide another across it. The mountain does not make room for ego disguised as compassion. As days passed, the seeker worked in silence again. When others passed by, the seeker listened more than spoke. Advice rose often, but it was left unspoken. The urge to teach became a signal, not of readiness, but of caution. The seeker realized, wisdom is not transferable like knowledge. It cannot be handed down without risk. It must be earned through direct meeting with life. The fall had not been from the mountain, but from humility. And yet, within that fall was another lesson, one the mountain had offered without mercy and without malice. Insight without reverence is dangerous. From then on, the seeker measured growth not by how much they could explain, but by how carefully they could stand. For wisdom, they learned, begins where the need to be seen ends, and responsibility quietly takes its place. Chapter 9. The Question That Matters. The guru returned as if they had never left. There was no announcement, no explanation, only the familiar sound of water being poured and the faint clink of cups set upon stone. The seeker noticed first through rhythm, not sight. Some presences announce themselves by how naturally the world resumes around them. They sat together without speaking. Steam rose from the tea, curling into the cool air before disappearing. The seeker felt no urgency now, no hunger for revelation. The mountain had already done its quiet work. Silence, once heavy, had become companionable. The guru poured the tea carefully, neither too full nor too sparse. The seeker watched the surface ripple, then still. In that simple motion was a reflection of everything learned so far. Attention without tension, care without display. At last, the seeker spoke, not from impatience, but from clarity. How do I live well? They asked, now as I am. The question surprised even the seeker. It carried no demand for perfection, no longing to escape the present self. It did not ask for enlightenment, certainty, or control. It asked only for alignment. The guru smiled, not in amusement, but recognition. They did not answer. Instead, they stood and handed the seeker a cloth. Together, they cleaned the cups. Water splashed. Hands moved. The question lingered, unanswered, yet somehow intact. As they worked, the guru said quietly, "Notice how you are asking." The seeker paused. The question no longer felt sharp. It felt open. "I am not asking to become someone else," the seeker said slowly. "I'm asking how to care for what is already here." The guru nodded. "Then you are listening." They stepped outside and tended the garden side by side. Weeds were removed. Soil was turned. Some plants were left untouched. The work was unremarkable, yet complete. Living well, the guru said after some time, is not a method. It is a relationship. With what? The seeker asked. With this moment, the guru replied, and the one who meets it. The seeker considered this. Memories of striving surfaced. Years spent preparing for a life that never quite arrived. So there is no final answer? There is an answer, the guru said, smiling faintly. But it renews itself each day. They poured more tea and sat again. The wind passed through the summit without resistance. To live well, the guru continued, is to meet what arises without adding a second burden. Pain will come. Joy will come. Confusion will visit. None of these require you to abandon yourself. The seeker felt something settle, like a long exhale. And when I fail? The seeker asked. The guru met their eyes. Then you begin again, without rehearsing the story of failure. They drank in silence. The seeker realized the question had already been working, not toward an answer, but toward a way of standing in life. Living well was not about avoiding error, but about responding without self-betrayal. The guru rose and returned to their work. The seeker followed, no longer as student chasing insight, but as a person participating in their own days. The teaching had not ended. It had softened. The seeker understood now. The most important questions are not solved. They are lived. And when asked from honesty rather than hunger, they do not demand answers. They become the path itself. Chapter 10. The Path Down. The summit, once a place of struggle and longing, now felt quiet and steady. The air was thinner, but the seeker's chest seemed lighter. Every step taken upward had taught patience, presence, and humility. Every failure, every frustration, every sleepless night had built a foundation no stone could match. And now, the guru spoke quietly, simply. It is time to go. The seeker looked down the winding path, the mountain's steep contours unfolding toward the world below. Descent would not be easier. Gravity favored it. Yet each step required care, awareness, and respect. The journey downward was not a return to old life, but a continuation of the inner journey, now lived in motion. Remember, the guru said, the climb taught you to endure. The summit taught you to watch. The descent will teach you to carry it all into the ordinary. The first steps were careful. Muscles that had strained upward now adjusted to lengthen balance. The mountain seemed different from this perspective, less an adversary, more a guide. Stones that had once seemed obstacles were now markers. Each step a reminder of lessons already lived, already understood. People and villages reappeared as the path sloped toward the familiar. The seeker noticed how easily the mind wanted to slip back into old habits. Judgment, comparison, the restless pull toward achievement. But this time, observation replaced reaction. Thoughts came and went like passing clouds, without altering the steady pace of the body or the calm of the heart. Along the trail, travelers passed, some seeking the summit, some lost, some carrying burdens as heavy as the seeker's own once had been. There was a temptation to speak, to teach, to advise. But the seeker remembered the fall from pride, the lesson of the traveler who slipped. Wisdom, they realized, is not handed down. It is lived. And so the seeker smiled quietly and moved on, listening more than speaking, present without performing. Each evening, the seeker camped beneath open skies, reflecting on the mountain's teachings. The journey downward revealed another truth. Life in the world below is not separate from the mountain. The clarity and humility cultivated above do not vanish at the foot of a trail. They demand integration. Patience is tested by traffic and noise, stillness by responsibility and desire, compassion by friction and misunderstanding. And yet, these challenges are not punishments. They are invitations to practice what has been learned. By the time the villages returned to view, the seeker felt a subtle shift. No longer a traveler chasing a guru, no longer a student seeking answers. Instead, a person fully accountable for attention, care, and presence. The mountain's wisdom had not been delivered in words or riddles alone. It had been absorbed in action, reflection, and endurance. And now, it could be carried into the ordinary world without fanfare. One afternoon, as the seeker crossed a familiar bridge over a quiet stream, another traveler appeared, eyes bright with curiosity. For a fleeting moment, the seeker felt the old hunger, the urge to teach, to guide, to be seen as the one who knows. But a quiet smile came instead, rooted in understanding. The seeker listened, shared a story only when it was asked, and when the traveler moved on, the seeker returned to walking, aware that the path downward is not a return, but a continuation. Each step lived fully, each moment acknowledged without need to control or impress. The mountain had been a teacher. The journey upward had built strength. The summit had offered silence and reflection. The fall had revealed pride. And the descent, the return, taught integration. Wisdom is not a summit to conquer or a lesson to hold. Wisdom is carried quietly, lived humbly, and shared lightly when the moment calls. The seeker walked on, feeling the pulse of life around and within them. The world was no longer a place to be dominated or mastered. It was a garden to tend, a path to follow, and a moment to meet exactly as it was. And in that meeting, the mountain remained, not above, but within. The path down was not the end. It was life itself, unfolding, step by step, now walked with clarity, presence, and humility.